Okay, hey gang, it's just coming up on two. Greg's going to join in just a few minutes, I think. Our expert got waylaid with a emergency crisis with a client. So, but I think I think maybe the way to start, we can gather some of the issues and some of the things that you or questions you might have. We may be able to help with ourselves. I guess you'd have to be willing to suspend your disbelief that Greg and I are experts in anything, but we've been talking a lot about these programs, so we can try and help. If there's things that we can't, we will take them offline, and on Tuesday, we will take them back to our expert on Tuesday, and then be back in touch with any of you on those programs. So maybe the way to start. Oh, he's in the waiting room. I don't know how we get him in the waiting room. Is Greg on there? I don't see him. He's. I just don't see Greg there. There he is. Greg with the long hair. He's in there. So yeah, we're shy an expert, but Greg and I will substitute for you. Maybe the place to start, and we'll make a few comments, and then go around the virtual room and take any of your questions. But Greg, I thought we would maybe talk about the Regional Recovery Relief Fund and how that's stackable with some of the other federal programs and what some of those things are, because I think people should be taking advantage of it if they can during this period. Also, the small business grant program and some of the issues around if you've applied and not been able to get access to that. We're taking those examples and being in touch with the provincial cabinet ministers, etc. And then the other one, which is more, there's a couple of local programs. The tourism program that Explore Waterloo Region is doing. So for those in hospitality and tourism, there is some that grants coming on stream as well. Greg, do you want to maybe just give a few thoughts on that, and then we'll take some questions, see what we can answer as quote experts today. But I said if we can't answer, we'll make sure we get the answers on Tuesday at the next edition of this. So do you have any thoughts or comments on those?
Well, I think what we're finding right now is we're really finding a lot of those gaps in some of the programs that people are falling through. So it's coming to the point in time where, as I've said many times, we're at the steep part of the hump on the camel, and all we need to do is just get to over that hump. We haven't got very much further to go. We just need to get over that hump, and I think this is the time where we need to, Ian and I certainly need the ammunition going forward to be able to talk to government officials, government leaders, to really bring to their attention some of these gaps that are in a lot of the programs that are, they weren't intended to actually stop you from getting the money that you deserve, need, or want, but they were measures put in place to kind of mitigate or strengthen the validity of the program from the government's perspective, to ensure that there was fairness, equity, and balance. We can see the problems that was in the CERB program, where they didn't have any checks and balances. They rolled out the program as quickly as they possibly could be. And then 15-year-old kids who were making $125 a week at McDonald's every week were getting $500 a week in CERB payments. And some of those things the government has recognized was as a result of them rolling it out very quickly and not being able to put in measures or controls that would really distinguish the validity of the claim. So I think, in subsequent models, we saw the SECRA program. If your landlord didn't want to apply, you were out in the cold, almost literally. So it wasn't a great program either. They pulled it back in, and then retooled it to come up with the emergency rent subsidy. Oddly enough, and there's an individual on right now who originally their landlord applied for SECRA. They got SECRA, so they were okay then. They qualified then. They received it then, and now the subsequent plan, the emergency rent subsidy, they for God knows why don't apply or validate themselves for having to receive that. And yet the circumstances are far tougher now than they were back with the secret program. So, it's I think what our job now is, and what we've been trying to stress to our political leadership, but also the bureaucrats that we talk to on a regular basis, is that the gaps are widening. And we're seeing that there's more and more businesses that have, really worked very, very hard. Like I said the other day, they're taking pop bottles back and cashing them in, trying to make sure they make their rent. They make their meet their obligations. So they've been doing what they need to do all the way along, and now finding that there's nothing there for them to get them up that steep part of the hump and on to better days. So, we need to hear those stories. Perrin Beatty has been very clear to both Ian and I since the beginning of this. Send in stories because he has regular meetings with the federal government. Send in those stories. Tell us what's happening out there because there's a very strong disconnect between Main Street, Ontario, and Parliament Hill. And there's just not a clear understanding. So we need to be the conduit to bring those messages and those stories to life. So we know that there are a tremendous amount of problems with the programs. And what we need to do is we need to hear those stories. And we're recording this so that we have the validity of those stories as well. So fire away. If you've got your story, tell us what's going on.
Okay,
I think there were some other people that were coming on today too, Ian, and I'm not sure whether they've got in or not.
They should be able to. I think you just have to click the thing. So if they don't get in, we'll make sure we double back with them for Tuesday's session. Maybe I'll start and maybe we'll just go around. And so we may be able to help because we've heard some of these before on some of these programs, but just identifying what issues or hurdles you're having would be helpful. So I don't know if I can impose and start. Julie, do you want to Heimpel, do you want to take a first crack? Or are you enlist? Oh, there you go.
Hi. I wasn't entirely sure what was going to be happening in the meeting today. I'm an office manager for a construction contracting company in the area here. And I was basically looking to come on here today to find out a couple of things. One is about the CEWS program and whether there are going to be new regulations or how you qualify for that. Like in our particular case, our company used that program back in March, but when we were able to reopen, we were very busy again and doing quite well without the subsidy for a number of months. But now with closures again, we anticipate being in the same situation. So how does it work to be off of the CEWS program and then reapply? What are the qualifiers the second time around? And then I was also wondering if you had any information about the realisticness of reopening February 10th, 11th, or how much notice you think we're going to get if that doesn't happen. Those were my questions.
Okay, well, let's start with the wage subsidy part of that. And I think what I've been able to take from hearing from some of the experts, as well as as Greg says, we're on regular calls, I'm in calls with Ottawa and Queen's Park, as is Greg. Each of the periods, and they labeled them by number, each period will have some slightly different qualifiers within the program. So it depends on which period. In that 28-day period, you'll be measured against, and there's several ways that you can do it, year over year, the previous month. So the specific answer to your question is you have to go into that program, go through the list your information for the period that you're applying for, and then it gives you the options. And I do think that you can, once you pick one lane, you kind of got to stay with it, right? Whether it's year over year, whether it's the previous month. So you should take a look at what you've already done and then what the new criteria are. But each period will have slightly different things, which is one of the complexities of the wage subsidy program itself, is that there are, different criteria depending on which period you're applying for. So if you go to our check website, the link for that program is there. There is a 1-800 number, and I strongly advise. I mean, that's a good place to start, anyways, is to try and get through on that line, to have them help you walk through that. But as we're recording this, we'll when we have our next session on Tuesday, kind of bring this question back, and we can double back or loop back with you if you're not on Tuesday.
Sure.
Greg,
Yeah, we're not far away from the year over year question becoming, I mean, once we get to March, then how do you compare year over year, right? But
yeah,
anyway, thank you.
On the second question, Greg, this is more, I guess, an observation, or we can give some sense. Greg, you were saying this morning on our other call with our colleagues at Best Waterloo about the closure and the likelihood of opening up. I don't know if you want to make a few comments on that.
Well, it's really going to be dependent on the numbers. We see the numbers coming down. I think the Ontario Health team has said they're not interested in recommending any opens until our daily case count gets down to about 1,000. It is trending in the right direction, and that's all good news for everybody. But I think there's also a plan to open up the schools again and send the kids back to school. I've always been a firm believer that I think, because of the asymptomatic issues around kids, that there's a high probability that some of them are bringing it home, giving it to mom and dad are taking it to the workplace. And that's why we're seeing that the more active channel of infection is the workplace. But anyway, aside from that, we're going to see schools open back up very shortly in all likelihood. And I think that's maybe a good step too. That's a signal that we're getting there. I think there's no question about it. Politicians are getting really, really antsy. They're getting the same complaints as everybody else. They're hearing your screams and hollers of saying, my goodness, like, how long can we sustain ourselves in this type of environment when our small business is failing? And I think they're getting that noise as well. So I think there's certainly going to be some interest. But I think the provincial government has kind of pushed it off till February the 20th. However, I think the numbers will dictate that. And if we see the numbers come down, we'll probably see an earlier open. But I think there needs to be a real strategy. We've been advocating since May that at all levels of government that, rapid testing or testing is the key. If we can identify and isolate those who have contracted the virus, that gives us a better ability to keep things open and move the economy in the right direction. Now that we've got that light at the end of the tunnel with the vaccines, I think from my perspective, if I was sitting down the advisory table with government, I would be saying, let's roll out as fast as we possibly can rapid testing, because we want to get the economy open. We know that we're coming out of the tunnel, and now's the time to really narrow that down and say, let's test, let's keep the economy moving as best we possibly can, and let's get those vaccines out. So I'm hoping that they're thinking along the same lines as my good old common sense approach would dictate.
I think the other thing to keep in mind is one of the things we're advocating, between both our chambers and through Best Waterloo, is taking advantage of the programs that are in place. There's not going to be any new federal programs, or maybe some tweaks around the edges. Same thing with the provincial programs, the small business grant program, which we already know there's gaps in that, and we're strongly pushing them to open that up for that $10,000 grant could make the difference between helping some small businesses kind of get through this last, as Greg describes, as his last hurdle until we get, or later in the spring or into the spring when things presumably will open up. So we're strongly saying, like, that's why we're putting these sessions on. And well, we don't have an expert today other than Greg and I, but we will on Tuesday and the other sessions to try and help people get through whatever hurdles there are or technical issues. And we want to keep helping people do that. Next week, we'll have someone from FedDev to talk about the regional Recovery Relief Fund, which is a program for those that have been screened out from other programs, whether it's wage subsidy or SECRA or the CEBA program, to have them come on and talk about some of the expenses that you may not have been approved for in the other programs, etc. So we want to make sure everyone's aware of how all these programs fit together, especially over the next couple of months. So we'll come back and with some more detail, Julie, on the Tuesday show or session on Tuesday. Who else have I got here? Kevin, do you have any questions or comments or anecdotes?
No, nothing just yet. I mean, I was coming on today to listen and see what other people are doing. We haven't applied for some of these programs yet, but something we're looking at obviously as this goes on further and further. So want to hear everybody's pros and cons of what they've found so far. So just want
what's your business and what sector are you in, Kevin?
Would be construction. So realistically, we're a safety training company here in Cambridge, Build Safe. So we're still able to operate obviously on limited numbers and of course, much smaller scale than we'd like to see, obviously.
Kevin, just for your information, you know, this would be a real hustling project for you, but if you are going to apply for wage subsidy and you do qualify for periods 1 through 5, the deadline is Sunday. You have to get it in. So
Yep.
that's really important just to remember that.
No, I've got the spreadsheets filled in. It's just a matter of basically inputting and hit send. So,
well,
good.
Hit send.
Hit send. Yeah. Who's up there at the top? My glasses aren't on. Is that Jesse? Jesse, you're on mute. There you go.
There we go. Yeah, so I'm just on here too for some more information. We're a manufacturing company in Kitchener with submersible robotics. We've been fortunate enough to maintain somewhat of a growth within during this time because you can do a lot of our robots are used to maintain social distancing. But with that in mind, it's still not as rapid of growth as what we had been experiencing before. So our growth plan is slightly changing. So I was seeing if there was any other opportunities when it comes to building expansion grants or innovation grants, what kind of opportunities we can go that way. So I don't know if there's, I don't know if I'm in the right meeting.
Yeah, I think Jesse, you kind of are. We're waiting with eager anticipation to hear more information on both the federal and provincial government when it comes to full recovery programs. So, you know, when the government's going to start to get serious about rolling out grants that are going to build our economy forward, because right now we're kind of at that stage where we got to keep intact the economy. That's part of the recovery program for sure. But once, as I said, once we get over that final hump and we start seeing things opening up and the majority of the population are starting to be immunized or we capture that level of herd immunity, the government does have very strong measures to go forward to capitalize on the stagnation of the last 11 months and build on growth.
The other thing, Jesse, is there still would be programs that are still in place that you probably are already using, but SHRED and other things in terms of if you're investing in either R&D or new product lines. So those types of programs are still in place.
Okay.
We haven't talked about them much. I would be looking at what your plan is, and especially as it relates, and I see Francis joining us from Ottawa, but both, you know, anything that's looks and is heading towards job creation is going to be something where they're going to keep those programs intact, because that's a big part of the recovery part is going to be job creation, right? And so, right now, as Greg says, I think we're really still kind of in that crisis support mode for many businesses, but what are we doing to pivot towards the growth that's going to be required? So, so I'd be looking at some of those existing programs you've already seen. I think it's a good question. We do have, we'll table some of these things and come back to those on Tuesday at our next session. Okay.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you.
Christine Grant.
Yeah.
There you go.
There are two Christines on here, so I just wasn't sure if you were.
Sorry, my apologies.
That's okay. So I am the situation that Greg was speaking about earlier, where I own a yoga studio downtown, and my landlord, who happens to be my husband, had applied for CECRA, and we received the funding, and now we were eligible for the full 65% of the Canada Emergency Rent Subsidy. We're also eligible for the 25% top up because our doors are completely shut and we have no money coming in. We received the first period and then received a call from the CRA saying that in fact we are not eligible for it because I'm not arm's length from the landlord, which is incredibly frustrating because one, we have nothing coming in. Two, the landlord, Rob, much more comfortable to call him Rob in this case. Rob has mortgages. He has, 3 private mortgages on the building, which he purchased 3 years ago. So it's not as though he's just pocketing all of the money that we're giving him for rent or anything that we would receive from the government. Like, we need the money to provide him rent. He needs the money to pay his mortgages. So we seem to be stuck in no man's land, and we're further pooched because we used loans to pay our rent for the past 3 months under the assumption that we would be eligible for the emergency rent subsidy. So then Rob hasn't showed a decrease in his revenue, which means that he can't even go back and apply on our behalf. And this is something that we already know we are going to need to take advantage in some capacity of this rent subsidy until it expires in June 2021. But as of right now, there's nothing we can do. We're just being told you're out of luck. So, we're sending letters, and Greg has been very supportive, but I just feel as though there needs to be support, or there needs to be someone saying, okay, here is your situation, and it can't be a blanket. It can't be like blanket rules for everybody.
Yeah. That's a very helpful example. I'm on a call and Frances McRae is joining us. She's been she's with the finance department in Ottawa, and she convenes a call every Wednesday, of which I'm on, where we bring these types of examples because this is important for them to hear. We had problems with the CECRA program where it was underutilized because it was only the landlord that could apply, and if they weren't in a mood to apply, it really screened out a lot of businesses. So I think this is important to hear these types of examples, because I'm not sure that that's the type of a situation that they're trying to prevent. I think there are some legitimate issues around the arm's length part, but so this example is, and I'll make sure that and we've been talking about this. Greg and I through Best Waterloo and on calls provincially and federally, because all of these things have to kind of work together, and that's a big gap in the system. You're not the only example that we've heard of this type of what was supposed to be a more permissive and available rent relief program that has actually screened out some that would have got it before. So and particularly when we're in this lockdown where you're obligated by the province to be shut down with zero revenue, it's a challenge. So I think Frances is listening in. She got the example itself. We've got this recorded, and I'm sure she'll take that back to her colleagues in Ottawa. These are the types of things. There won't be new programs, but hopefully some of these modifications to where inadvertently we're screening out businesses that need that support. So thank you for sharing that, and we'll kind of report back on that.
Just Ian, just a quick one, it's Kevin, just jumping in here. They really need to look at some of these programs in regards to some of us that are, non-arm's length part of these businesses. A lot of us entrepreneurs are basically at arm's length of all of our businesses, and we're being punished because of that.
Yeah, and there are, that's both with the provincial and federal programs, we've seen some of that. So I saw Francis just post something in the chat box. Francis, if you want, you can unmute and talk, but I know she just said that that's a great example. She's had some of those before and is in discussions in Ottawa around how to try and see if that issue can be resolved.
Let me tell you, Francis has been my secret best friend through this whole thing, and she responds extremely quickly for a federal employee. Like, they just don't reply back to you within 5 or 10 minutes often. And Francis has been a real trooper, and Francis is well aware of this situation. I've talked to her, Christine, on your behalf, and we've communicated with respects to this. And it is an anomaly. And this is where the crack starts to widen a little bit on some of these programs. And we're fortunate to have an advocate in the ministry like Francis, who can, can't wave her wand and perform miracles, but can certainly challenge and communicate our interests and your interests back to the decision makers, where hopefully we can make those common sense decisions.
I just want to say this is the first time I've seen Francis's face since March the 12th. We've talked online, on the phone for about 11 and a half months, but so it's nice to finally meet you, Francis, or meet your face. So thank you for joining us today, and you're welcome to make a few comments, because this is the type of thing we're doing every Tuesday and Thursday to try and get these examples, which are the real life examples of how businesses are being affected. So welcome.
Yeah, no, thanks, Ian. I don't want to interrupt your session. You asked me to invited me to sit in, and I actually had a colleague sit in on one of your other ones, because we have this call, as Ian's saying, every week, but I get emails all the time of very particular situations, and one of the things we do ask is we kind of need examples, because it's one thing to say to CRA, well, this issue is a problem, but if you kind of work through a situation and say, here's a specific example, and people can strip out names of companies if they don't want to provide them, but here's a specific example of a situation in which this type of an organization who would normally, we would think we would want to have access to these programs, is falling in off because of this reason. Ian, I won't comment very, very much, because I know I want you to be asking, asking and answering questions. I just want to make two other points. One is a bit of a point on the issue of applications on the wage subsidy program, which I'm going to come back to in a second. But one thing about arm's length, and as Ian alluded to it, the design principle there is that, there would be people in an arm's length situation, a non-arm's length situation, who would take advantage potentially of something like this. And then, you could see the headline being, husband pays wife, or whatever. Like, there's all kinds of reasons why something like that would be designed in. And there is, in the rent subsidy program, an opportunity for people to also have mortgage payments covered if they're a business. And one of the things we actually advocated for that with the Department of Finance. I don't work for the Department of Finance. Ian thinks I work for the Department of Finance. It's the in industry department, but
Industry, sorry.
It's okay. When they told us about this, program they were thinking about, we said, well, be careful, because there would be small business owners who would own their location and pay mortgage. And we certainly know with hotels, that's much more common. You would actually have a mortgage more rather than pay rent. So we really wanted to advocate for mortgage to be included. Now, I can't say exactly how the CRA is treating this particular case, Christine. But what I can say is that that's kind of the troubleshooting that we can do sometimes, is go back and forth and to really try to understand what is the factor that is excluding you in these cases. And what are the options around that, and are there too many people falling in this category that we go, you know what, that's not a group we would want excluded. So again, I say it's the government, right? I mean, I'm a bureaucrat. The government takes decisions, but we bring information forward about the issues. It's no accident that these programs have become more permissive and more open as time goes on, right? That's not an accident. It's because of feedback. And I think ministers will hear you say that. Just the last point maybe I would make, there was a comment about application for the wage subsidy program. There are periods to apply, absolutely, and timelines to apply. But if you look carefully, you can also see that you can apply up to 180 days after the period has closed.
Okay, that's good to know.
So just because you're not in the period, I mean, yes, they're taking applications as of certain dates, and they want everything in, but I know this because I had to talk to CRA about it last week. You can apply retroactively up to 180 days after the period has closed. Okay.
Okay,
So
that's very helpful.
All I wanted to say.
Okay, and thank you, Francis, for joining us. And I would say we've run into some of these types of things as an example where organizations such as ours were screened out of the wage subsidy program just because of some technical things around, who was doing our payroll. So, some of these things can be adjusted. And Christine, we'll keep banging away on this one because if you're in before, you should be able to qualify now. And so, that's why we want to hear these specific examples. And Francis has been, as Greg said, is my new best friend as well, because we bring these either on the call or offline, and they're always, she at least takes them and advocates for the as Greg calls them, there's a lot of cracks in the pavement, and those are the ones that we want to hear about. Okay.
Well, as I've said, she's the best bureaucrat in Ottawa. So
it is true. We'd like her to be the clerk of the Privy Council, but she's turned that job down. There's one question here from Kevin, and then I know Kathy, you're warming up here for the next question for us. But specific to the CERS, the rent relief, new rent relief program, are private mortgages also covered through that? So I mean, that's one of the difficulties that many are having if you have a private mortgage versus one with a chartered bank or a credit union. Do you have a line of sight on that, Francis, or that's something we should be digging in with our expert on Tuesday? You're on mute. You're on mute.
I think my view on it would be if it's a legally registered mortgage, then regardless of the obligation is still there from a legal perspective, and it's probably a recognized mortgage from CRA's perspective. It would probably have to be. I think if it was, if somebody, borrowed a couple of $100,000 from their dad and it was kind of a handshake deal, that's a little different thing. But
yeah, I'm afraid I don't have any good answers to this right now. It kind of goes beyond the level of my awareness about like exactly how the eligibility works. I will see if I can find anything though on that specific question. I'm actually now curious about the details on mortgage. So let me see what I can figure out.
Because I think you're right. There'll be many in this situation that may not be eligible for the rent for some reasons, but we've got to understand the mortgage side of that, the mortgage relief part. So, okay, thank you, Frank. We weren't putting you to work here. We wanted you to kind of listen to what we were doing, but while we have, we will put you to work. Okay, Kathy.
Hi to everyone, and thank you in advance what you're doing. We are in business of barber shop in KW area since 2017. License, trade license, the city license, as well as valid lease contract with landlord. My question is about rent substitute. We are not qualified. If in order to be qualified, you have to be in meet one of the three categories. One of them is basically you have to have a business CRA open before September 28, 2020. And lack of our knowledge, mistake, live and learn, I create that business CRA after November 2020. For that reason, I'm not eligible to get the rent substitute. I already confirmed this with CRA. I already confirmed this with talk with a local politician in KW, back and forth, and they check their end. So they come up saying, that's too bad. So my whole purpose of reaching the others and you is basically bring our voice in positive way to the others and people like us, when they can prove they are in the business, lack of knowledge or not understanding or not doing the things right at first time without knowing, or lack of the getting the any assist from the government.
So a couple of questions. You've been operating since 2017. Have you filed taxes, business taxes with CRA?
Sorry, yes, I forgot to, yes, sir.
Okay,
yes.
So what you didn't have was the CRA, my
Business.
CRA business account online.
Correct.
And this has been an ongoing thing. And I think we said early on, Greg, when we started this way back when, is that's one of those things that was what screened out a lot of business. If you didn't have that CRA, it was very difficult to apply. I think we will take this.
I think that there's got to be something else, because I think it's generally speaking, when you go to apply for some of these, and if you don't have a My Business account with CRA, you can at any time set one of those up, and then you can move forward. So there's got to be something else. The other thing is, my understanding is that there's two ways that you can claim the rent relief program, and Christine's been through this, so she might be able to be a better expert on it than anybody. But there is the ability for your landlord to apply as well, if your landlord has a mortgage on the building. But if they don't have a mortgage on the building, then they can't apply. But
Doesn't want to do anything. Landlord doesn't want to do anything with that. It never wanted even. So,
yeah. Wow.
Okay,
I think we need to get some clarity on that, Ian, and make sure that, because it sounds like it's I can understand it if you had never registered with CRA and had never submitted taxes and you just started your business, because there are different programs for businesses that started after COVID, the pandemic came along. But this doesn't make sense if it's a pre-existing business that was registered, as a operating business, just because you signed up for your CRA account online, your My Business account. I don't think that should be the exclusion factor.
So Kenny, if you could send either Greg or I an email or an email to that chambercheck.ca, give some as much detail as you can, what your business is, maybe even your business number, so that we have some of those details. We can go to the relevant, whether it's Francis or our expert that comes on Tuesday, and we'll get back to you on that, because it doesn't sound right to me either. I think that sometimes you were screened out if you didn't have the account, but you were always able to, as Greg says, get that and then reapply. So there's something seems that we need to figure out what it is, because on the face of it, with especially the shutdown, you're not allowed to be open right now. So, and if you've been operating since 2017, these are the types of examples that would say you're being screened out, and it's not the type of you're not the type of business that they're trying to screen out. So if you can do that offline, we'll take that to our experts and the folks that we're connecting with.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. Michael, you've been patient there. Sorry, there he is. He's Team Canada. You're up there, Michael. You're on mute there. But there's Greg's sign. I love that sign. You're on mute. There we go.
There we go. I saw that
awesome.
little red. Okay, there we go. Sorry, I'm pretty new at this. I sent my details to Dana in an email, and it was my personal situation, but it ties into I was an owner at United Taxi for many years, sold out 4 years ago to a guy who was doing fine until March, and then he could not afford the payment anymore. I took back the ownership of the share January 1st this year. My wife has COVID. I don't want to drive and risk the chance of bringing that home to her. So as far, I was just wondering whether there was any programs that could help in terms of not being able to operate my own small business, or caregiver programs for her, which we never looked at before. That ties into the bigger, most of you are have bigger businesses concerns. As you can imagine, the taxi business has been very heavily hit by COVID, plus other rideshare and all that kind of stuff. As far as I know, but go ahead.
No, I was going to say on the caregiver programs, I think that's one we'll maybe take offline. That would be one that the local MPPs would have a better line of sight. That's not something I'm familiar with, or Greg, but I think we can, you know, whether it's Catherine Fife or Mike Harris Jr. would be able to understand those.
Right.
Well, my understanding is, I think your wife has not COVID, but she has COPD.
Correct.
And your concern was, you know, you would otherwise be out driving the cab and earning a living and bringing money into the household. You can't do that. So my understanding was from the federal government, I believe there was something under the employment insurance that provides coverage for individuals who are in a situation like that. You're in a caregiver situation. You're excluded because of reasons with respects to COVID-19. And I think we need to look at some of those programs, Michael, and see if that's where you would fall, because otherwise you would be running the cab. You would be doing whatever, and you might qualify for some other subsidies as a result of having to run a cab that's maybe not getting the volume that you once had. So I think we need to look into the programs to make sure there is something there that you might qualify for.
Okay, and that may be one we take Greg to the next expert, get them the weekend to sort of get briefed up with that example, and then Michael, either join us again on Tuesday, or we can be back in touch with you with what we hear there. So
Dana has all those details, if that's
okay,
the expert that you're talking about.
Okay,
yep. No, and I have the details too, Michael. So
okay.
we'll make sure we bring it to an expert's attention.
Okay, now there's another Christine, which I only see the last name there. So Christine with one name. Do you have any questions, comments? Finding her mute button. Who else have I got? Jesse's, we've seen Jesse. Who else? Was there Sean? Or who? There was a Sean on here before.
Sean was on. Yeah, he just popped off a minute ago.
He just popped off. Okay.
He's from driver's seat, and he's been on a couple of times, but never had an opportunity to weigh in. But you know, I know it's I think to some degree, and I know it's really frustrating. Let me tell you, it's certainly frustrating from our perspective, because we are getting phone calls and emails every single day. We're inundated with them with, situations. They seem like anomalies when you first hear about them. Like Christine Grant's, for example, to me was kind of an anomaly. Michael's is certainly an anomaly. But we got to think that you're not the only one in Canada that has that exact same circumstance. So these are broad sweeping problems that with the programs, and to a great degree, we have to give credit to the federal government for first coming up with these programs that are good programs, and they can help. They're not going to make anybody rich, but they're certainly going to help us limp through this. But they've also had their ears wide open. and all the way through this. And both Ian and I can attest to that, and Francis too, that, you know, even the decision makers that she works with every single day, their ears have been always wide open and trying to find a way to ensure that legitimate cases are dealt with in a fair and equitable manner. Sometimes though, it takes a lot of time. Like I think we worked on the wage subsidy, Ian, for 8 weeks.
More than that,
10,
like
10.
12 or 14, and Francis was part of that too. It took quite a while to have some of those discussions to kind of get the couple of changes. The other thing I would point out is that, and this is not a defense, but it's part of the reason that we're staying so active on these things, is there is nothing surgical about legislation. So when they pass a program, it's 40,000 foot with as much detail as they can, but it really is not surgical. That doesn't get down to how do you operate your business, your yoga business, Christine, or your construction business, Kevin or Julie. They just can't do that. So there is inevitably going to be, and it's no different. Greg and I were city councilors. You don't pass a bylaw and think that it's surgical. It has to be, a bylaw for the whole city. So you're going to miss some of these things, which is why these examples are really important, to say, how do we make these examples fit into the larger framework? And that's what the reason we're doing this now is we want people to apply and get that cash flow support now, so as many businesses make it through to the other side. So when we can open up, there's actual businesses to open up. So it's cash flow support and making sure that we're taking these examples of where we're finding, for whatever reason, inadvertent examples where people are being screened out, that we try and get them fixed in real time. So
thanks to Francis, she gave me a connection to FedDev Ontario to talk about the RRF plan when I was talking to Christine about her yoga studio. And there are there are avenues for sure, but what the avenues really are is expecting that Christine and her business partner in the yoga studio want to mount more debt onto their backs that they're going to have to deal with down the road. And so some of the conversations, and this is maybe as much for Francis's ears as anybody else, some of the conversations that I've had as people, small businesses saying to me, look, I've gotten all of the CEBA money, the $60,000. It's awesome that the government is saying if I pay it back by a certain date, I can keep 10,000 of the two swaths that were sent out, so 20,000 in total. But they're also saying at this time that they're very uncertain as to whether they'll be able to meet those targets of repaying it by those dates. So they'll be foregoing the forgivable amount. And then it just becomes more debt compounded on the backs of these small businesses that are, at the best of times, it's a chore to keep your business going and keep the lights going and keep your employees paid and try and build in a little bit of a nest egg for retirement, because as we all know, small businesses don't have a retirement plan unless they build their own retirement plan in. So I think the RRF program, I think Christine, you and I both agreed that there were probably programs in there that you fit into for a loan. But a loan is not what you want to come out with to be saddled with at the end of the day. And I think that's where we need to take the programs that exist and find out, this little sliver of craziness, maybe we can shave that off a little bit, and because your claim is a legitimate claim. And your husband's ownership of the building is a legitimate ownership of the building, and his mortgages are legitimate, and everything seems to be a legitimate. It's just this kind of crazy little complex thing that that throws a wrench into it. So I'd rather work hard on those.
I think Francis wants to jump in here, but just in the chat box, I don't know if you can see that, Francis, but because on some of our calls, we've had this issue with the 1-800 numbers and the hotline and people having, and this has been something we hear, I know you hear on the Wednesday call, where some of these phone numbers it takes a long time, if at all, to get through. And I know that's a concern, because one of the things that is trying to be done with the federal government is to make sure that the people are at the end of the phone, because you're dealing with small business people, and us, and me included, Greg included, that, you know, sitting on a phone that's beeping or waiting for someone to come on the line for 2 or 3 hours is a recipe for someone just hanging up. So anyways, I didn't know if you could see that in the chat box, and I think you were going to kind of chime in.
Yeah, no, thanks very much. And, you know, I do talk to my colleagues at CRA about these issues. I know they did tell me that prior to Christmas, and kind of in that period when the SIRS just opened, they did have, you know, a lot of volume. Last check I had with them, though, they, you know, I mean, I'll go back and try to figure out what I can find out about their phone lines. But it is really important, right, for people to be able to get through on their specific cases. So maybe if you can make this kind of a standing question, Ian and Greg, for your discussions, I think I'd be interested in getting that feedback. The one thing I will also just say, just, you know, around the issues here and around, you know, the listening, and the point that Ian made about legislation. There's nothing easy about legislation. There is a process, and, you know, that's why we have a parliament. That's why we, you know, we are able to do these things. Gradually people find out as they go along, well, let's put some things in regulations that the minister has the ability to move rather than coming back to parliament. And, you know, having a virtual parliament doesn't help us. So, you know, a lot of, you know, just changes that I think people would have wanted to make are, you know, really hard to make. I was going to just go back to, I mean, on the wage subsidy program, there is a function where you can challenge the decision now, which was built into the legislation. I'm just trying to check and see if I see that on the rent subsidy program on that legislative piece, but I don't see that. So that's one thing. It's a bit of a long shot. Just on the regional development agencies, I think, you know, and I'm really glad to hear, Ian, you're going to have someone from FedDev come in. They have flexibility that other programs just don't have. And, you know, I hear you, they've got loans, but, you know, they're also conditionally repayable loans, right? They have flexibility. They also treat the files kind of, you know, they look at them case by case. And so the discretion that they have based on looking at kind of a longer history of a business or track record, that's what gives them their advantage, right? They know their clients. And so for anyone who's not familiar with the services of the Regional Development Agency, you know, and beyond the RRF, because the RRF was designed as a to fill gaps on all of those companies that we couldn't design for in CEBA, as an example. Because like there, you know, you think you know all the different types of companies there are out there. You don't. Like there is, that's the one thing this has taught us, everybody, is there are as many different types of companies and situations, you know, as you can imagine, and you can't possibly design for all the things that you know that are particular to the way a company is set up. So that's really important. But I really, you know, when you have the RDA come, get them to talk about RRF, but they're all of their programs and how they operate. The knowledge of their clients on the ground, the looking in the eyes of someone, you know, who's a business owner, you know, maybe virtual, but they do it, and they just have an ability to be so much more, you know, tailored in their approaches. So I just wanted to say that.
Yeah, no, that's helpful, and that's I wouldn't have naturally assumed that, but I think that's one of the cases. We did have a webinar with I forget the fellow's name, but for maybe 2 months ago around RRF and with FedDev, but we're going to have him on. And again, there's other programs through BDC and other things which we need to, and that's why we're posting all of these programs on our Chamber Check website so that you have all of them. And I think this is where for those listening and for what we're trying to share, folks, is you almost have to go through them all and say, where do I fit and where don't I? And I think this is a common theme that we hear in our conversations, Francis, not every program is designed for every business, right? But, you know, the whole suite of business or programs, the idea is that hopefully there's a couple, 2, 3 of them that help you get through this. So that's helpful. And we will, I think we're going to try and do that Tuesday or Thursday of next week, is to have that person on from FedDev, Greg. I think the other one would, for those, and I'm just interested for those on the call, the Ontario Small Business Grant Program. Has anyone applied for it? Are you aware of it? And have you had any problems with it? Christine, go ahead.
So we applied for it, and we were successful in getting a portion of, we didn't get the full amount of $20,000, but we did get a significant amount.
Okay. Yeah, most will, I think our understanding is most would get, thanks, Francis. Have a good day. Appreciate you joining us. Thanks. I think most would probably be more in that $10,000 range than 20, but
yeah.
We've had a lot of folks who are screened out for a number of different reasons. The way it was drafted, we thought it was either you were obligated to shut down on December 26th, or you'd had revenue drop of a certain amount. But you know, the way that they're interpreting is you had to have all 3 of those categories, because there's all kinds of businesses that when the stay-at-home order came, their business dried up, even though they're able to be open. But if no one's coming in because everyone's at home, you still have that problem. So I don't know, Kevin or Julie or Jesse, maybe not so much Jesse, because if you don't have the revenue drop, you wouldn't be eligible. But for the others, are you aware of the program, and have you applied for it?
We're aware. We haven't applied just yet, though. We probably should look at it.
Yeah. Okay. Julie?
Are you referring to the second round, like not the initial $40,000?
No, this is different. This is a provincial program, the Ontario Small Business Grant Program.
Right. No, we have not applied for that. We did the initial $40,000 loan, but I think, yes.
Through CEBA? Yeah, okay. That's the federal program.
But because our business bounced back really well once we could reopen, we hadn't really been following this stuff quite as closely, because we were doing really well until this current second lockdown again. And now it's kind of a bit more of an unknown. So that's partly why I came on here today, to kind of get back in the loop of what's happening, because I haven't been paying as much attention to it as I probably should.
Well, there was another $20,000 through the CEBA, so you can bump it up to $60,000. And if you pay that back by December 2022, you get to keep 10 of that. So
it's a 20 of the 60.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyone else?
I think the other programs that are worth noting, that if you haven't, sometimes some of the programs you have to be, like, your doors have to be closed, shut tight. The other programs, though, the property tax relief and the energy rebate program are all on provincial programs. They're ontario.ca/COVID support. They weren't necessary. They were contingent on I think on a revenue drop, but they were really contingent on the fact of the dates. So you're eligible for those programs from November 23rd right through. And it is a tiny bit of a pain in the neck to do, because you know they're not going to rebate you a flat amount against your energy. You have to turn in the receipts or the bills once you get them. And Christine, I think you did. Did you do that? Did you do the? Is it a pain in the neck to file for that stuff?
No, it's pretty easy. You just have to scan 2 months worth of receipts, because you can apply for 2 months worth of and then there's also one as well through Union Gas that you can do on, like, if you go to Union Gas, their website, you can do a Union Gas one as well. But it's really easy. I hope they get extended.
Okay, maybe we're going to leave it. One more from Caddy, and then we're going to wrap up. But we've taken a lot of these questions and issues, and we will be reporting back on Tuesday to the group. Caddy, your last word to you.
Just confirm. Yes, we did apply, and we received that. I didn't apply for any utilities because It was telling me I have to upload utility of January 2021 when I never received even one bill. How am I supposed to upload when I never received one? So
Yeah.
I just bypassed that.
Mhm.
Okay, so when you get that, I think you'll be able to apply for that when you get your January bill. Okay, listen, thanks everybody. It's been helpful for us. Like even getting the feedback is helpful, as you heard from Francis, and for us having these live examples is really important. So feel free to join us again. We'd love to see your smiling faces on Tuesday or Thursday because there'll be more information.
Yep.
You check the website. We add stuff as it comes in on chambercheck.ca where you can register for the next session, but we appreciate you joining us.
I will tell you that it was a real bonus to have Frances McRae on today because she directly reports to Minister Ning. And you know, pretty rare to have her attention for as long as we did, and getting these stories directly into her ear from you is even better than from us. So
Yeah, absolutely.
hopefully it
No,
helps.
that's great. Hey,
Yeah.
listen, gang, thanks so much. Everyone have a great afternoon. We appreciate you spending time with us today, and please do join us again if you've got more questions. Please share this with any colleagues or others in your